maybe my talks are going to be a little bit different, but hopefully complementary to what you've heard from really our experts out here. But, as Sasi had mentioned, one of the things we like to do is to see what can we continue to do to enhance the value of the lab, enhance the value of diagnostics. So that's going to be a little bit of my take as we go through these things. So let's see. So we've been talking a lot, at least they've been talking a lot, so maybe just to know you a bit better, that's the first question. I just wanted to first understand from you, you're all from the labs, where are you from, the public sector or the private sector? So can you use your QR codes and give your answers, please? Okay, so it's a pretty good mix of both public and private, which is great because, the pandemic affected everyone. There were huge issues, whether you were private, whether you were public. So great to know that. Now, the second question is also here. Now that you've been through the COVID, hopefully it's finishing soon, what is your sentiment about the lab post-pandemic, about your lab? Are you optimistic? Based on what you've seen, that there are more opportunities now that open up to increase your value, the value of the lab? Are you pessimistic that now it's more challenging, more difficult? Or are you just neutral, like things haven't changed much, it's the same? So if you could just answer that, please. All right, so that's good. The sentiment here is pretty good, generally speaking. Okay, but there are people here who think that, in fact, this has led to more challenges, which is real as well. And hopefully we'll talk about some of those things, right? So maybe we'll take a step back and even go beyond, before the COVID pandemic. What was the sentiment about lab diagnostics, right? So one of the realities that I think most of you experience is that the clinical lab represents really a small percentage of the total healthcare budget, even though we know, as people involved in the lab industry, that it really has the potential to influence the total cost of care. So this is something that has been discussed for a long time. We do know that lab, besides providing timely and accurate results, can do a lot more for clinical outcomes, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in our second session. One of the harsh realities of diagnostics and the world is that 47% of the global population has very little access to diagnostics. So imagine this is happening and then the pandemic is happening, that's even a bigger challenge, right? And even though we believe that diagnostics are central and fundamental to quality of healthcare, the reality is that it is not very well recognized. There's a lot of underfunding, inadequate resources at all levels, be it private or public, by the way, generally speaking. Okay, so even before the COVID pandemic, there were challenges that we had as a lab industry. Now, what did the pandemic tell us? So on the good side, of course, things like the words PCR, rapid antigen tests, they became normal, routine, household things, politician things, whatever. Everybody was talking about it all the time, right? Okay, and significant investments were made, as you've heard, in trying to manage the pandemic better, and we have to applaud what most countries have done about it, right? Now, it was also very well revealed that, depending on the diagnostic capacity of the country or of the region or of the city, that was directly linked to your ability to respond to the pandemic, and that was also a big challenge. So, when you look at all of these things, and when you think of the future, the reality is this was not the first or the last pandemic. There'll be more, and we need to be better prepared, right? But in reality, it's not just preparing for the pandemic. I think my point of view, or the point I want to stress, is that given that diagnostics are central to healthcare, there's a lot more we need to do, whether it's to manage the pandemic, whether it's to manage communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases. So there's a need to do a lot more. And that's a common challenge we all have. Okay? Now, this was a statement from one of the WHO directors. We need a dual track approach for the new normal. On one hand, we need to invest significantly to prepare for more emergencies. But on the other, we must ensure that we maintain and strengthen day-to-day essential health services all the more. I mean, the reality is, yes, big numbers of mortality, morbidity, and so on, but we also know there are big numbers of mortality and morbidity in other diseases and other things that are afflicting us, right? So we need to manage both. That's the right thing to do, not just worry about the next pandemic. Okay, so when we think about the new normal, I mean, this is one of the very obvious things. We talk about masks, testing, flexible working, virtual meetings. We all need to get used to it, even in the lab. But there's also a realization that a threat anywhere is now a threat everywhere. That means you got to think cross-border. You can't think I'm sitting in one country, I'm protected, I'm okay. You're not. Nobody is, right? And then obviously there's this big looming thing about the healthcare budget impact. You know, what will happen? The governments have spent a lot of money on COVID. We're already hearing, just yesterday from Korea, that they are intending to cut 15% across. That is the discussion going on. They want to cut 15% of the healthcare budgets, meaning if they were giving $100 for an MRI to a hospital, it will now be $85. And that has a repercussion everywhere, right? But at the same time, there's a realization in many countries, if we don't invest in healthcare now, if we don't strengthen our infrastructure, that's also a big challenge for the future, right? So all that discussion, debate is happening, and it's not an easy one. Now, at the same time, you know, if we take it one level lower and seeing really what's happening in our world, and I think as lab, we also have to think, you know, we are in the hospital settings, what is happening at that level? So one of the things we've observed, you know, in talking to people who are working in the hospitals is that now the patient truly is taking more the center. You know, the hospital executives are talking about experience journeys. How do we improve things for the patients? It already started during the pandemic. You know, so there's a lot more discussion around patient awareness, access, care planning, treatment discharges and ongoing things. There's clearly a trend towards movement of care closer to home. We need to think, what does it mean for the lab? Movement from curative to preventative health. That's also a big discussion going on, that if truly we want to improve healthcare delivery, do you start still focusing on treatment, or you got to think about prevention? And you know, I'm based out of Singapore. Many of you might have heard of the Healthier SG initiative in Singapore. It's a radical discussion initiative, which is a reality, that they're telling the hospitals, your budget is not going to be based on sickness. It's going to be based on the way you manage health, including wellness. So everybody has to think differently about things like primary care and how do you manage and maintain the health of an individual, not just thinking about testing for sickness, okay? The pandemic also revealed, as we heard, about staffing issues. People, all of you, all of us, and our people, it was such a big issue, right? And it still is. Mental health, stress, burnouts, blah, blah, blah. All that means that we need to think seriously about this challenge for the future. What do we do more for our people? How do we make it better? Clearly, digitalization has come to the forefront. There's a lot more discussion about how do we use digital to improve things, make it more efficient, right? Whether it's telehealth, which has become, you know, we've been talking about telehealth pre-pandemic for so many years, and it never really took on much. And the pandemic completely changed it. So that's a new challenge and a new opportunity. What does it mean? What more can we do? You know, and then things like AI are coming in. You know, cybersecurity has become more of a mark because now everybody is talking about digitalization. And given all the challenges on budget, there's again a discussion starting on value-based healthcare. You need to understand that. It's all important for all of us. What does this mean? Okay, so this is just one example. I found it because it was also, this company has Thai approval since we are sitting in Bangkok. So TytoCare is a company that talks about taking primary care to the home. They will give you all what you need as sensors, equipment, whatever, so that you can actually monitor and be, you know, through telehealth, get your initial checkups and everything done in a much more efficient way sitting at home. This will dramatically change things like this. This is innovation, this is disruption, right? So all these are going to gather more pace now, And that is a challenge for us as well to think, what does it do to us? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity? Do we need to change the way we think about things? Probably yes. Okay, so this is my third question to you. What does this new normal mean for your lab? And here you need to select all the things that matter to you. Okay, so there are 5 choices. You can select more than one depending on your lab. Go ahead, please. Okay, a bit of everything. That one actually went very fast. But D seems to take the biggest number of votes. Need to upskill staff. So people matters have become very critical, right? And we'll discuss a little bit more in our second, oops. Oh, he went away. Never mind. So the point is that, there are lots of challenges, lots of opportunities, and you got to think about it, right? So if I had to summarize all of it to say, what are the implications for the lab management? One part that Tony obviously mentioned is you got to think about all of these responses, right? You need to have crisis response teams. Do you have that today? If you don't, think about it. Do you have your SOPs all, based on what you've learned? Have you made new SOPs to deal with the next pandemic? If you haven't, you better do it, right? Then beyond that is, this part about the need, and you've already said it in your voting as well. You need to think about how you can enhance operational efficiency and clinical value of the work you do, okay? One of the areas to think about is how do you think about standardizing things? How do you automate? How do you digitalize? So that's one of the things, but it's a challenge. How do you become future fit? The pandemic has told you need to be agile. You need to change things quickly, right? Things change quickly. So how do you invest in technologies that are more flexible, that are more scalable, so that you can, expand up very quickly if you need to? How do you really become more patient-centric and consumer-centric? As I mentioned, wellness is also becoming important. So your role is going to change, and you have to think not only patients, you got to think consumers, right? And then leveraging your staff more effectively is very, very critical, right? And we'll discuss a bit more about it. And this came up a little bit also in the previous talks about collaboration. As a lab, you got to collaborate more with clinicians. You got to collaborate more with industry to really have the best outcomes, and with government stakeholders. The government stakeholders need to know the relevance of the lab. They are aware of it, but it's our job to continue to stress on it, right? So I would like to just, end by saying that, the pandemic has been a wake-up call, and the contributions that have been made in the pandemic during the lab should really catalyze that shift in the focus and mindset, right? Meaning there's a lot more the lab has done, can do, should do, and it's our job to continue to work on that. So the new normal can really be stronger, smarter, healthier, and like I said, the lab can contribute to it. So, in the challenges, there's this big opportunity that we have, that this is really the best time we have to enhance the value of diagnostics. If all of us keep talking about it, stressing it, making it visible, showing what the lab can do, get more money, I'm very sure that can help contributing ultimately to better healthcare delivery, wherever we are. Thank you very much.